So a fitting way to wrap up this morning is to talk about skills mobility in the workforce. So please welcome to the stage, I'm going to butcher this name, but I'm going to try my best. Divya Venkatavaraghavan. Good, good, wonderful. And a group of wonderful panelists. And then afterwards, we'll serve lunch out on the third floor terrace as well as the glass house. Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you to an exciting discussion on skilling at scale for the new age of work.
Check.
We have amongst us experts and builders who understand the complexity of doing this for a large, diverse, and young country like India. And let me set some context, and then I'll invite our panelists to jump in. India opened nearly 4.5 new colleges every day for the last 20 years, and its universities quadrupled in the same period. 52,000 institutions in India educate an average of 700 students per institution. 50% of all enrollments in higher ed in India happen in 3 areas: arts, commerce, and science. Enrollment in vocational education has grown only from 1 to 8% in 20 years. However, 45% of graduates, as of course a lot of you will be aware, are unemployable. And in this context, we are throwing in LLMs who are transforming the world of work at a furious pace. I'm going to request the panel to jump in with what are the areas of opportunities in this highly uncertain environment. Divya, do you want to start?
So, thanks, Divya. See, India has a demographic advantage. If you look today, we have over 54% of population which is under 25 years of old. We have 62% of people working age. We keep talking about the disruption that's happening. All these new technologies are causing disruption. But I think we focus on disruption. What we're not focusing on is that these emerging technologies are also creating huge opportunities for us. There was a survey done by Team Lease which says that by 2030, by 2026, end of 2026, there will be a need of 30 million people skilled in digital skills, right? Which means 50% of the working population will need to be reskilled to meet this demand. So there is a huge opportunity, but skilling is the need of the hour. If you look at the number of GCCs we have operational today in India, we have about 1,500, and this number is going to go just by end of next year to almost 1,900, 2,000. So again, if you look at the number of employees or the employment will go up. So I think the important part is that skilling is important, but it also have to focus on the skills that are evolving today. So I see a huge opportunity for India, not in just emerging technologies, but everywhere across the vocational skills also.
No, so to add to what Divya said, India has a massive demographic advantage, right? But that is only an advantage if majority of them are highly skilled. And skilled is a route to being employed, because the demographic advantage is only advantage if it is productive. And for them being productive, I think the biggest contributing factor is what higher education could give to them, which makes them employable. Most studies, and it is little worrying, indicate that a very huge percentage of people with the graduate degrees are unemployable. And being unemployed is one, but being unemployable is bigger concern. So I think it's very, very critical and important for India right now to make sure that, be it traditional or non-traditional higher education, but making sure that it makes people employable. End of the day, 99% of India goes for higher education with the hopes that they will get a job. So fulfilling that, I think, is very, very critical.
So taking on that point, how do we scale the skilling then to accommodate this future? And I would request the builders especially to jump in here.
All right. Thanks, Divya. Just like to do a quick introduction. So my name is Hari. I am the co-founder at Great Learning. So coming back to your question, Divya, I think for scale, what is extremely important is that the upskilling doesn't become something which happens after college, but it happens within college, right? Because right now, if you look at the upskilling landscape in the country, it is mostly candidates who graduated from college, who've been in the industry for a few years, and then they realize that, these skills are skills that I lack, and hence I should upskill. And obviously, by that approach, you're touching a very small percentage of the population, right? But if we can integrate it with higher education, with actual degrees happening in colleges, I think then we really bring about a change to a much larger people, and that probably is the best way to solve the unemployable challenge that you and Abhimanyu spoke about.
Great. Thanks, Hari. So let me sort of set my context in this. I think the debate of industry and academia being far away is not a new debate. I think we've been having this debate since the day academic started and industry started. It is sort of seemingly becoming more relevant today than it was about 20 years back, because the business cycles and the skill cycles are becoming shorter, right? That's essentially sort of fueling this debate. Do we really need a degree? Do we only need skills? But sort of as far as my take goes, I think if you want to solve this problem at scale, which is the discussion of this panel as well, scale changes come through grassroots. And the grassroots are the colleges, the 52,000 colleges that we have in the country. And how do we enable them? And one of the great pieces that this sort of country's government is doing is about the NAP. So if you look at NEP, it sort of integrates your vocational program. It tries to integrate. I think it's going to take some time, but tries to integrate that vocational part. Are degrees going to go away? I don't think so, because this debate is not new. Because degrees are more than just a skill. It's about building a person. It's about the experience of growing up. It's much more than that, than a skill. But yes, the skilling discussion is definitely getting more relevance in today's day and age, where the skilling cycle is shorter than it was about 40, 50 years back, or 20 years back.
I have a slightly, so I know Hari and Ruchir, you both talked about the skilling at scale more in the college graduates and fresh graduates joining the workforce. Today, I believe, and even if you look at the organizations, right, where people are actually working, but they need to be upskilled, and there is, for the frontline workers, there is a huge reskilling opportunity. And how do you reskill those people at scale? So I'll just share an example. What we did at BCG was using all these new technologies, Gen AI and everything, right? You can actually create a generative learning platform where you can use the content. Let's take an example of an insurance company, right? You have a bunch of their documents, specifications. How many people actually go read through that or even retain the knowledge, right? So I think with the new Gen AI technologies and everything, there's an opportunity of using the tools in creating the bite-sized learning. As an example for insurance agent, if they are meeting a client and they need to figure out what product do they need to sell them, they don't have time to go through all the manuals and everything, and they say, okay, I just want to quickly understand, I'm meeting this client, how do I get the information? What do they already have, and how do I upsell them? But the information you get from your organization, the real-time content you get from open source, using these generative platforms, it will customize the learning journey, a bite-sized learning journey for your question. So I think that is another aspect how the organizations actually can use the Gen AI tools in upskilling their frontline workers.
If I can just use that as a launch pad, how do you see the learning process change in a lot of these? See, some of you are building your own products, and some of you are helping colleges improve or workplaces improve. So how are you seeing some of that? Is that embedding really happening, or is it a case, is it a longer conversation, folks already there?
Yeah, as I said, I don't think we have a choice anymore, right? It's, and when you talk about skilling cycles getting shorter, it's also sort of means that there has to be continuous reskilling and upskilling and continuous learning. If sort of you are only, as a college or as a provider, you're only as relevant as your kid, right, who's essentially taking courses at your end. And if you're not able to provide that relevance, then you'll get obsolete. So I don't think there is any choice anymore. The impact of shortening business cycles, and obviously, I understand academia takes some time to adopt, Because I still remember talking to kids who graduated in my college. They're still studying some of the same syllabus that we used to study about 20 years back, right? So academia takes some time to work, but the realization and the policy framework essentially is enabling them and telling them that you don't have a choice, which is, I think, the right thing to do. Otherwise, this demographic dividend might just become a demographic liability, right? That's what people keep saying. That if you don't sort of put the right skill in the right person, then this huge young population might just be huge young population unemployable, which we don't want, right? So there's no choice. I don't think there's any choice but for us to skill at scale.
Divya, to add to your question, when we talk about that, what are the limiting factors at scaling it? I think one big difference between, of course, providing online courses was maybe even 10 years back came out as a first answer that let's put these courses online and that will fix the problem of skilling people at a large scale. But if we look at the biggest problem why it didn't happen, is fundamentally adherence. Now, if I quote that MIT had published this report, that all the online programs that they created, and I'm sure everyone in the hall would relate with it, barely a small single-digit percentage of the people who start a course finish it. So MIT's report was that only 3% of the people who started a 3-month-long program completed it. If I assume that any meaningful program, skilling, reskilling, or upskilling program would last maybe at least 6 months, and if I multiply 3% by 3%, that becomes almost 0.09%. That means 1 in 1,000 person on an average on an online platform is completing a 6-month program. So then second, and of course without adherence, if people are not even completing it, then while you might have increased the scale of touch point, but the scale of learning delta didn't get created. So then I think the second important thing becomes is that how do we increase the completion rates, right? And then LLMs do present a very interesting opportunity. Recently I had the opportunity to hear to someone who is working at the forefront of LLMs. And even their belief is that the biggest contribution that large language models might make in like across all the segments might be in education, because adherence to the course often is a function of personalization of the course for me. I may argue that the completion rates in a university with smaller classes is much higher because that human teacher is able to give more personalization to the students. And now if you imagine that if there could be a personalized training model for learning for each individual, that might definitely substantially increase. And actually at Scalar we did do some early experiments. It does reflect that if people have a way to learn in their own ways, and if it's not, let's say, just one video recording which is meant for everyone, it does increase adherence massively. I think the issue of integrated curriculum to the industry that we talked about, definitely a critical problem, but easily solvable problem. But I think increasing adherence in a high-scale mode is the harder problem, and many of the new technologies do present opportunities that it might get substantially changed in the coming years.
I think there's a connected point, if I may. One is absolutely adherence, right? So that more people complete or more learners complete the course. The other is also demonstration of that skill set, right? So if we actually break this problem, right? One is upskilling in a college environment or in a formal education environment, and the other is at the workplace, right? Now, for the college owner or the college management, what really matters is that are these students who are doing these courses, are they getting better jobs? Ultimately, that is the proof, right? So unless and until that proves out, right, they are not willing to invest. Somebody has to invest in this education upskilling to happen, right? They are not willing to invest, which is why we see traction is happening, but these are pilots that happen and it's not a full-fledged adoption, right? As soon as there is a breakout story of, listen, this is what happened to this college because they did this, and see the learners are getting now better jobs. It's just a matter of that one success story coming out, and I'm pretty sure that will become the norm and adoption will start, right? When you look at corporates, L&D or learning and development is not a new function for them, right? They've been doing this for a while, right? They've adopted various ways of reskilling and upskilling their employees. Now the question is, how is this approach better than everything else that they've tried in the past? So there again, I guess demonstration of skills is also something that is important, right, to get traction.
Ruchir, yeah, I can see you
sorry.
have something
I've
to
been
share.
sort of waiting to say something. I think I'm sort of going to be a bit in disagreement with the folks here. So, and sort of we work at a grassroots, right? And I can tell you that there's a big dichotomy in the Indian education system, right? It's not about reskilling and getting to data science and ML. The problem is that we have a huge gap between haves and have-nots. I mean, we are sitting at 26% GER, right? And in that GER, we have 50% vacancies of teachers, right? So for me, I think if you have to scale at scale, and scale at scale, it is not about the elitist, right? It is not about getting someone who's a computer science degree holder from a great college and get him an AI ML certificate. No, that's not scaling, right? It's about getting that have-not and getting that person who's sort of living in a small city, not having exposure to the rights, not even having exposure to the right education, and how can we enable that education to become relevant? But that is when you scale at scale. You don't scale at scale by opening up a university. That will solve problem for 500 people. We are trying to solve problem for 10 million students who take admissions every year. We are trying to solve a problem for 40 million kids studying and 11 million kids graduating. That's a huge number. That's maybe more, the number is greater than the population of half the planet, right? Countries. So that is the kind of problem that will help, it has to be solved. And that's where the value lies. It's the difference between getting the have-nots to employability market. That is where I think the impact can make a difference, not by training 100,000 people.
And just on that, how do you see you're saying that there is a fundamental gap in what they come into the colleges with. And on top of it, you're trying to demonstrate accountability, right? By saying you can get a job. What is the role there that some of you play in helping the college maximize the outcome for every student?
I think, let me talk from CollegeDekho's perspective. I think first, send a designer to a design college. Don't send everybody to an engineering college. Don't produce 11 lakh engineers in a year. That's not that any country can sort of absorb, right? We have 14 lakh people. JEE results are out today, and about 14 lakh people had sort of took that test. I don't think any country can absorb 14 lakh engineers. So we're sending a lot of creative people to do medical and design. Don't do that. First of all, help the kid find the right place. That's 50% of the problem. And then 50% of the problem is how do you enable that curriculum so that he graduates better or learns better, right? And that's what we do at CollegeDekho, right? We help first discovery of that kid to the right college, and then helping these colleges teach better. Very made in India sort of problem. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that we'll be able to make even a small dent in sort of what the current landscape is. That will be very successful.
So our work with universities is more on the design and delivery side of it, not on the admission side. So I do take Ruchir's point that, first step is to help learners or students select what is the right program for them basis their interests and talents. But once the students are in the college, the way we work with universities is essentially to make it more industry-oriented curriculum. So the topics may still be the same, but the way the projects are done, for example, right, they get mentored by industry experts. So there's an online live interaction they get with industry mentors throughout the program, with internships and so on and so forth, and also finally with assistants, career services assistants at the end of the program, right? So those are the elements that we bring in. The one good thing with NEP that's coming through is that now 40% of the courses can be delivered online. That's allowed. So I think that as it gets rolled out in universities, informal education courses, I think that can become a very good step in terms of how does everybody get access to really good industry-led courses, right? Irrespective of which college and which university you're a part of, right? So that is something that I think some colleges have started, but adoption will happen, and that should be a game changer.
Just want to add to what Ruchir and Hari said. We still talk about degrees and universities, and I think, and we always question also, are degrees important? I think one thing we're doing is, so degrees are not going away. I don't think we can undermine the value of degrees. Some some professional courses will always require degrees. Being a doctor, being a lawyer, being an engineer, you need degrees. But we always, I think, confuse between degrees and the skills. They are not interchangeable. Degrees have their own value. It's the skills that are going to be very relevant. And degrees are not for everyone. Right? To your point, I mean, not everybody has to go into STEM field. There are a lot of vocational skills, a lot of careers opened up outside these traditional professional careers. And for that, it's not just the degrees. NEP actually helps that you can actually go into vocational skills and get diplomas and everything also, right? So I think we have to think beyond STEM. We have to think that we shouldn't be combining degrees as equal to skills. These are not interchangeable. So I think with the increase in the number of career opportunities in the vocational skills, that's another area where I would say maybe typical universities don't play a role, but the diplomas and the vocational institutes play a big role now. So that's another area where we see a lot of employment not happening.
I have 2 points again to make to Ruchir, and which are again very counter to what you said. I like it, it's turning into a debate. The first point was on helping kids choose that, how many should do engineering, how many engineers could the country absorb. My very strong belief is that in a country like India, which is with a very low average per capita GDP, what really drives someone to a program, like 98% of Indian 17, 18-year-old kids, they do not know that whether they want to be an engineer or designer or doctor or whatever. What they index it on that which degree would get me a job. Like if you just remove the top 1% living in Delhi and Mumbai and Bangalore, that is what 99% of the India cares about. That where do I have highest probability of getting employed, and secondly, employed at a good salary. The reason 14 lakh people filled JEE form this year is only and only that there is a precedent of many decades that people who did engineering found on an average much better jobs. NEET, on the other hand, probably had 2 million applicants, which grew very rapidly in the last decade. And the reason for that was, again, that everyone who got an MBBS got a job. Like there would be no MBBS holder who just cannot even get a job. So ultimately, employability is what drives what people study in a country like India. And it is going to be so until and unless we become a 30 trillion economy where people can really do whatever they want to do. The second point on 100% agree on that the real impact would come from the grassroots. Even a university which maybe enrolls few thousand people, has as high quality as MIT, is not going to change India. While it might change India in one way, but it's not going to change the country-wide parameters. However, that being said, I think my belief is that it will not be solved by marginal improvements. It will rather only be solved through an inflection point that comes. As you talked about that, maybe 30-40% of our teaching positions might be empty today. And even the 60-70% which are filled, like with a pinch of salt, majority of them are filled with highly incompetent teachers who are into teaching because they couldn't do anything else. Now, solving that by incremental marginal improvements, I think might not really have big impact. One area that I'm pretty optimistic about, if we look back at, say, 20 years back, the most elite people, let's say the aristocrats in Europe, their kids will have a in-person tutor, a very highly competent person who is sitting with the kid one-on-one teaching them. What I do believe is that the pace at which generative AI, etc., is growing, and even we are running quite some very ambitious experiments on that, it is probably possible to create an in-person tutor which can teach every kid, like all your 30-40 million kids who might be studying. And the quality of that personalized tutor might be as good as the most competent teacher at the best institute. Now that might create that inflection point. That it doesn't happen that instead of 60%, we start filling 70% positions and the quality of average teacher increases by 10%, because that's really not going to change much. But I think I am optimistic that there could be in next 4-5 years, someone might build, something that might be hard to imagine today.
Fascinating. We've been talking mostly about the potential. I think it's important, something that Divya mentioned earlier, to talk about the risk of obsolescence as well. Because we do have a large population of first generation employed folks who maybe started out in the IT services space or in a customer care center who are looking to pivot their lives because generative AI is here. What is your take on how do we approach that problem as well? It is becoming a problem, but how do we try and help them find the new opportunities?
So, just like what we've spoken here, when it comes to graduates in college, right, education is means to a job, right? So upskilling, all of that is means to a job. Now, when we talk about working professionals and obsolescence at the workplace, I think there also the core need is that, how do I get a better job, right? Or how do I at least not lose my job, right? If my skills are getting obsolete, right? These are the two decision factors on the basis of which candidates, decide in terms of what to upskill or which skills to acquire. In our experience of working with working professionals for over the past 10 years, what we've usually seen is that because working professionals have some context to how the industry and the organizations work, they usually go choose ancillary skills that are in demand, right? So what that means is that I could be a technology professional, but data science is an ancillary skill for me, right? A finance professional will not one fine day wake up and say that, oh, you know what, I want to become a full stack developer, right? So because of that, there's that context that they have in terms of, okay, how will the industry view my career progression? They usually go pick up ancillary skills that are in demand and which they see are being valued by their respective organizations, right? So if I get skilled in this, maybe a promotion becomes easier, or I can do a job switch and so on. And that's how they decide that these are the skills that I want to acquire.
I think similar to what Hari just said, I think it's for working professionals very different. First of all, they don't have time or sometimes even the motivation to invest in the programs that are really long, 6 months or 8 months or 1 year programs. They want the shorter cycle with an impact. So they're not obsolete, they stay relevant in their organizations. And even for organizations, it's important that they reskill their employees because always hiring fresh talent from outside is not the feasible solution for them. So I think to your point, it's very important they find the adjacent skills, right? As an example, the leadership is a great example. A lot of times people just become, they grow in the hierarchy and they just become managers. But a lot of times organizations don't realize that just promoting somebody to a leadership role, do they really have the leadership qualities? That's also called reskilling, right? You have to ensure that you have the right leaders leading the company. So I think that's where there are a lot of opportunities. People have to understand that even in the softer skills, they need to be reskilled and they can get these new skills. So I think for the working professionals, continuous learning is one thing very important. Just taking a course one day and saying, okay, I did this course and now I'm going to see the impact of it doesn't happen. You have to continuously learn, reskill, and upskill yourself. And I think that's where you stay relevant in the environment today.
Okay, I think obsolescence is sort of, I don't think we have enough time to discuss that, but what I can tell you is when we talk about automation, the most biggest jobs that were getting affected by automation were very low-skilled jobs, right? Data entry and call processing. But with generative AI, we think most of the specialized jobs are also going to get affected, right? And that sort of brings in a very tricky paradigm for all of us about obsolescence. Because what is the right skill which might be obsolete in 5 years, nobody knows. I don't think anyone, at least in my sort of, I don't know, which is a skill today which generative AI can affect, and it might just become obsolete. For example, people say coding, which is probably the selling skills today, might be the first one to get obsolete. So, sorry, I'm just taking note of, I don't want to comment on skill. You guys are doing a great job. But I'm saying that the effect of this technology or the maturity of this technology on skills and obsolescence of those skills is unknown. So yeah, I said not enough time to discuss that, but maybe in some other forum.
No, but I think net, it means what you earlier said, that the skilling cycle are getting shorter and shorter, and it will probably get even shorter. So basically, quickly identifying that what is the thing that keeps you relevant and quickly learning that is the only key.
I think the challenge always from a learner's perspective, just 10 seconds, is that you want to do incremental learning, but you want to get transformative impact. How can I learn the least, but my life should change? It doesn't happen like that.
And just 10 more seconds here. So for Ruchir, I understand, like, coding. If I go back to my days of coding, I don't think the coding will go away. But the way we learn coding and the way we use coding is very different. So definitely a change in how we use it. But I don't think some of these basic skills will go away completely, even with the new emerging technologies and Gen AI.
No, what I wanted to say is that the idea is that practice makes you perfect. I don't think we'll have enough time to practice. Before you practice, you might just become obsolete.
It looks like we could have enjoyed another 30 minutes of this. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. And thank you to the panel for this very stimulating conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.